And now I can't speak for the others, I'm going to speak for myself. I want you to imagine that there's a piece of equipment out there just for which there's a confusion as to the regulatory rules to which it's to be held. But I want you then also to imagine that every engineer that's looked at it has very high assurance that whatever it is, it's much, much stronger than it would need to meet. In other words, we're not sure what it's being held to, but it's really stronger. Now, if that's true of that piece of equipment, then I, sitting here, feel comfortable that that piece of equipment is going to operate safely and do its safety function after the earthquake, right? And the NRC can screw around with that stuff all they want, and if someday they will. But that's not my remit. My remit is to say to the citizens of California, that piece of equipment is going to be there doing its safety function after the earthquake, quite separate from whether or not it meets those regulations, which are not our remit. We pay attention to them, we learn from them, we struggle with them too. But in a complex situation like this, I'm asking a higher question, and I think a more important question, and I think a question that the citizens of California have a right to get an answer from. And you don't have to agree with this, but that's my view. Now, that said, I have personally reviewed the analysis of the performance of that plant in earthquakes. You can review it too, it's in the public record. There's a whole lot of stuff, it's technical, but I've spent a lot of my life doing it, and I did it again just last year. And I have convinced myself that with a couple of open questions, and we're going to come to one later having to do with some questions about a couple of things that are still open. I don't know that they're not right, but I'm just not sure yet. That every item that has to perform after an earthquake out there and perform its safety function after these earthquakes has significant extra margin above whatever it would be asked to do, okay? I've convinced myself of that. I'm just me, okay? And hence, I have concluded, I'm not talking for them, that if that's true, then that plant is adequately safe against earthquakes. Because whatever it comes out, it's going to be a lot of extra margin. Now, I have to give you a caveat. That's all predicated on our current inadequate understanding of the shoreline fault, okay? We don't have enough information about the shoreline fault to understand it fully. And this is the crucial point. But our current understanding produces ground motion there of a certain size and character. It has to do with frequency and duration and size that I've looked at and that I've convinced myself all this stuff is adequately safe against it because it's got a heck of a lot more strength. Isn't that nice? If it's so. But I have an open mind. It could be that after the shack process runs its course, the community will decide that the shoreline fault's ground motion or some other thing could actually produce higher motion than that, in which case I would have to reevaluate. I would go back and look again. Fair enough. We're going to see how that comes out. But except for the caveat that the ground motion to which it's going to be subjected, we'd like to learn more, but this is what we know now. Based on what we know now, I have convinced myself that there's adequate safety of every single piece of equipment out there that has to perform after an earthquake. And I can give you a chapter and verse on where that came from if you want, and it has satisfied me. Now, the fact that that also satisfies the NRC is nice, but it's not my decision, it's theirs. Their interim finding, as I read it, is that they've concluded the same thing. That's why they're allowing them to operate. That's why they haven't taken action other than that. They don't allow, they haven't intervened. So I think that took a few minutes to explain, but I think it's really important for members of the public to understand that while this turmoil at the NRC has to do with compliance and regulation and rules and law and fines and all that other stuff, I'm not looking at that. I'm trying to understand the safety of the plant, okay, which is a different thing. Okay, I'm done.
I do want to add a comment before Mr. Giesman would chime in. With a great deal of deference to Dr. Budnitz, since he's really the expert on seismic reactor safety. I do have a different take. I do think the seismic science here is not mature enough at this point in time to answer a fundamental question and concern by members of the public. If you guys know so much about seismic safety, quote, can you tell me when and where the big one will come? When and where and how big the big one will come?
We can't.
Right, nobody can tell you.
We can't.
With that uncertainty, I, for one, certainly am very receptive to the current public inquiry on seismic reactor safety.
Me too.